Welcome to the Petrichor Marching Arts Podcast, where we talk all things marching arts. My name's Bryson. I'm a songwriter, composer, and mixing engineer, teaching and designing for drum corps, marching bands, and indoor percussion groups on the East Coast, as well as my mainstay school, Newtown High School in Connecticut. I'm sitting down with performers, educators, and creators to discuss perspectives on the activity, to see where it's at now and where it's headed in the future. On today's episode, I'm here with snare drummer and visual specialist Omi Batan, and this is part one of a two-part series with Omi on approach to visual for the battery percussionist. All right, so we're back. It's been a couple months since the last episode. If you missed it, the episodes in August I put out were with Tyler Campbell, talking about college band, and a couple cymbal podcasts as well with Rex Gutierrez and Kat Godfrey. But now we're back. We're getting to some visual focused stuff. I've recorded two podcasts with Omi Batan, and we are going through just kind of the philosophy of visual for the marching percussionist, how that kind of plays a role inside of indoor percussion and drum corps, and just different ideas that maybe a lot of teachers don't always think about, even myself, in terms of how to approach visual in a way that makes it more of an integral part in what's actually happening. Obviously, this is a marching activity, but I think a lot of us, especially music-focused people, get very lost in the preparation, for example, for the music side of things, and kind of let the visual to go to the wayside a little bit too much, instead of letting it be a very holistic experience. So these ended up coming out really well, and I'm excited to share this with you now. How are you, Omi?
Doing well, sir. How are you, Bryson?
Doing all right. So, I forgot to mention this before, but when I woke up this morning, I had one of those Facebook memories, and it was of a video I posted in 2011 of the recording of the run-through that you did with cadets in Meriden, Connecticut on October 10th. I posted that video on October 10th, 9 years ago.
Oh, jeez.
Which is wild. Today's October 10th, right? I'm not tripping. Yeah. But I totally forgot that you were the first DCI drumline that I ever saw, or DCI group I ever saw, was you guys rehearsing in Meriden, Connecticut.
Oh, yeah. That was a pretty rough rehearsal.
I think you told me that at some point.
Yeah. That's cool, though.
That's when I first saw Tim Miller, and then he ended up teaching 7th too. And James was there, I would imagine. I don't know if he was there at that point or not, but...
James Sparling?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was at Cadets 2011.
Yeah, so I ended up marching under him too, so it's kind of funny to see all that. And it's crazy too, there's another video I posted on Facebook that same year on tour of Crown, and I was sitting directly behind Ryan Anderson, who would also be my quad tech in 2014 too. I thought that was super bizarre.
Yeah, drum corps is definitely a big, small world. For sure.
Yeah, but cool. So obviously today we're going to talk mostly about visual. Do you want to just go through who you are in general? I've heard of you since I was in high school because of Kevin and Matt Thompson and stuff teaching there, but I've always heard your name around, and I finally ended up meeting you, and I forget what year, if that was 2017 or something or not, but...
Sure. Yeah. It's funny, I actually drummed with Matt Thompson at UConn his senior year, I believe, my freshman year.
Yeah.
That was 2008 and 9.
Yeah, that makes sense.
2008-9. So, my name is Omi. I marched snare drum primarily. Started at Stanford High School. Shout out to Stanford Black Knights. Went on to do Hurricanes DCA Corps in 2009. And then I marched with Jersey Surf in 2010. And went on to Cadets in 2011. And marched United Percussion in 2012. After that, I had the amazing opportunity to teach the University of New Haven as assistant band director with Jason DeGroff as director, and also taught Norwalk High School percussion line for a few years, Stanford High School, got back to my roots there, Cranston East, Rhode Island. Shout out to Cranston East. Yeah, I taught there my sophomore year in college.
Oh, okay.
shout out to Greg Arsenal for giving me a chance to kind of get my feet wet. Taught a year at New London High School, and yeah, I've just been kind of helping out and teaching throughout my marching career, and it's been an amazing experience so far, meeting all these different personalities and different influences.
You mentioned
I taught 7th Regiment too with you.
yeah. You mentioned Stanford and Connecticut Hurricanes. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but both of those groups, while you were there, were like very good, right?
So Stanford High was an amazing experience. That is where I first met T-Gas, Alex Beltran, Rudy or Ruel Camacho. Lots of great people came out of that program. And yeah, we were on I would say, definitely at the high point of the marching band there. Marching band and winter percussion at the same time. A lot of high quality instruction came out. Also shout out Fusion. I was caption head, co-caption head, co-writer at Fusion for a few years. So yeah, it's been a hodgepodge of experiences for sure in this activity.
Because I was going to say, I mean, most people ended up knowing about all the people that were from Stanford, which I think is really cool. And I feel like it's a little known fact at this point that was a thing. I didn't hear about that for the longest time too until I started eventually hearing that everyone was from the same place, and that line was actually pretty good.
It was a fun experience, and I think one of the coolest parts was we all kind of just do our thing. A lot of great performers and musicians come out of the East Coast, Norwalk High School, Brian McMahon High School, Westhill High School, Stanford High School. Really great programs and really, really cool people.
And was that, at one point, was Stanford's indoor program like a collective of multiple areas, or was that literally just Stanford High School?
That was, so Ruel, for those of you who know Ruel, he's also Rudy. He marched Bluecoats. He was a quad drummer. If you've seen that video of him saying all these awesome...
Four-door minivan, all that?
Yeah, four-door minivan. That's him. He came from a technical high school, so that was my year. So I guess, yeah, we did have some students coming in to drum at Stanford High, but primarily West Hill had their own program. I don't think any other high school in Stanford had marching programs. So I consider, if you're marching at Stanford High, in my mind, you went to Stanford High. But definitely, I believe after my time teaching there, they went independent for a little bit.
I think that's what I'm thinking about, yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm not too familiar with what the dynamic became after that, but I know that no matter what happens, Stanford High is always that little engine that could for the percussion. Yeah, even now, it's still so obvious that they have some decent training going on there, like regardless of the kids that they have. I feel like some people don't pay attention to that, but it's totally recognizable. One of the cool things I think about Stanford High as a personality is there's a lot of grit that comes out of that school for a bunch of different reasons. But from what I take away from that is you have all these students coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and they all unify under the Stanford High flag and have a mission to kind of just represent what Black Knights percussion is and have fun doing it.
So were all of you that were together there, or a good chunk of you, like the people you mentioned, all at Hurricanes together at the same time? So, or was that all separated?
So T-Gas was there a year before I was there. And when I went in 2009, I was marching from Stanford High, Beltran, Ruel, Andrew Bishop, who is a snare drummer. He never did drum corps, but he's a really talented musician as well. Also, we had some people in the pit, Kristen Morgan. It's so hard rattling off names because the years are definitely blending in now.
Was Shaq there the year that you were?
Shaq was there. Norwalk High, he was the center at Hurricanes.
Yeah, I sometimes hope that those years don't get lost in the sauce, because some of those videos are really cool. I've seen some of the Stanford videos and some of the Hurricanes videos from that year in general. But yeah, anyways, so the whole visual thing. So Do you have kind of like a basic philosophy of movement that you kind of highlight how you approach visual in general?
So my focus on visual hasn't really started until I started teaching with Fusion and CWP. Also, shout out and RIP CWP.
Oh, yeah.
Taught with Travis Peterman and Shaq. And that was where I really understood the intricacies of what visual does for an ensemble at the same time as the activity kind of forming to more of the visual pageantry aspect. And what I try to do is try to marry the concept of still playing well and having the music sound good while also moving and visually looking clean. And a lot of that I'm realizing has to do with how the performers are feeling internally, how they're thinking, and how they're representing whatever the intention is to the audience.
Yeah.
The performance aspect I really dove into with college band, actually. So I mentioned I marched at UConn. I was given the opportunity, shout out Tyler Campbell, give me the opportunity to come back and teach at UConn and at UNH as well, to really tap into what is it to be a performer who is entertaining versus what we focus on in drum corps with competition. What is it to be clean and entertaining?
Yeah.
Why not try to get those realms of entertainment, performance quality, performance presence, and performer satisfaction all at the same time, no matter what tier or what level in the activity you're participating in. So competitive or not, if the performer's not having fun, there's a low chance that the audience is going to be having fun. If it doesn't look good, then the entertainment value is probably going to get lower. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying my perspective on visual and how my philosophy has been formed is trying to encapsulate all of those elements.
Okay. And what do you think would be the first step? It sounds like from you you're saying that, obviously we have to start with, learning how to march and all that stuff. And maybe if you're at CWP, everyone's kind of maybe just the overall higher level. But is one of the big things you have to start with the actual mindset in general, like you're saying, so that they can, even approach the basics exercises with the correct way of thinking in terms of improvement, in terms of analyzing themselves?
Yeah, I think so. I think Ricky Grasso does a really good job with this. Culture building is very important. Shout out Newtown High School. I taught there with you also, and Kevin Thompson and Ricky. So that culture is really going to be the first step to the why. Like, why are we here together right now? Why are we going to this rehearsal? Why do we spend X amount of hours committing ourselves to something, right? So the why, I think, needs to be discussed first, because anything that we show on our face as an expression, there's an intent behind. A smile means what? Is it a sarcastic smile? Is it a happy smile? Is it a fake smile? Anger means what? You're ruffling your eyebrows. Are you serious? Are you angry? Like, what is the intention? So I think one of the first things when you're building a program that is supposed to show or represent an emotion or a thought, the performers need to know what that emotion or thought should be, just as a culture. So that's kind of, I think, the first step. Okay.
If you don't mind, I think I would definitely like to talk about performance first.
Sure.
Because what comes to mind for me, even just in drum corps, the drum corps medium, like my first world-class audition, I tell people this all the time, was with the Blue Stars in the winter of 2012, like the end of 2012 for the 2013 season. Mm-hmm. That's when John Mapes and Ian Grom were coming in for the first time. So we all got there Friday, and then Saturday all the Pulse kids flew in. And at that point, I had never seen indoor in person before. I had never, and not the level that those kids were at, especially. Mm-hmm. And have barely seen enough videos that didn't look like they were filmed on a potato in 2008. So when they came in and actually just played like stick control for the first time, it was almost shocking and a huge culture shock to how much they actually performed, just being themselves on the regular Saturday at an audition camp in November, December, whatever, just playing eights and stick control.
Right.
I remember I was like, I think like Sunday I was already cut, and I think it was it was like January at the second camp I was cut or whatever. But I was like literally taking notes about, so I didn't forget what that actually looked like and how that felt. Because it's also just adding to their approach to sound quality, and they all looked like they were having a lot of fun, kind of like you were saying. It made everything more fun when they were there. It's definitely more intimidating, that's for sure, because there's all the Chino Hills kids, Ayala kids and stuff, and that's pretty wild for someone that's living in Connecticut. How do you want to see students approach performance right away? Like, is that something you hold weight in? Like, do you want them initially, like, as soon as you see them playing and stand still, that they're going for it and hoping that translates to everything else and trying to translate that yourself to the visual block?
Yeah. I think about how we define the word performance, right? Are we performing something that we believe in? Or are we performing something that should be taken as information?
Yeah.
And I think, again, it goes back to the intent behind the reason why performers are there. Because you can tell if somebody doesn't believe in what they're saying, subliminally or not, you can tell. It's like, okay, this is a great drink. You should drink it. It tastes sweet. It's cold. When you're hot, it's a great, refreshing drink. Okay, great. You told me the words. There are facts in there, but I didn't sell it, right?
Yeah.
When you take those same things and you're like, this is an amazing drink that will quench your thirst and it will satisfy you with its sweetness, and it has this amount of fluid ounces and it tastes like this, and if you like this thing, then you like that. There's a level of relatability that is inputted in the delivery. And I think the more performers are tapped into themselves and understanding, like, how does this moment or does this show make me feel? It's more easily translatable to the audience. So for your example, when you were saying, when you were auditioning, you were taking notes on the vibe you felt. And, you're intimidated by the people in front of you who are also auditioning. There isn't like stand at this angle and then you're now more intimidating. Look at this point in front of you and at this level of intensity, and then now you're going to be at a certain like measurable level of performance. It's the beauty of the marching arts and arts in general is there's so much more of a human aspect in order to get that connection with the audience. So it comes back to, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And then all the other technical aspects kind of fall into place. How we play the drum, how we move our bodies, what technique are we using? Are we using bent leg technique or straight leg technique? All of that needs to have a foundation based in intent and purpose. And I think that is where the beauty of performance comes out of.
Yeah. And how much of that do you think just comes down to confidence? I mean, I guess knowing yourself enough to understand how you're being portrayed is essentially confidence in yourself. But I mean, also like confidence from consistent rehearsal schedules and everything just feeling like it's falling into place so that they can just do their thing and not have to worry about anything else.
I think confidence comes with time and constant self-reflection.
Yeah.
When I think about getting in front of the UConn drumline, for example, they're not a competitive organization, but there is a lot of identity and pride associated with what it is to be in the UCMB and what it is to be in the drumline. That is what I look for when I teach that drumline. It is about getting to the core of, you're right here in this circle drill. Are you present? You feel good. You're doing exactly what you auditioned for. You got in. You're representing, a top 100 university, and you're going to be playing for thousands of people at Rechler Field, whenever we get back into that zone post-pandemic. But essentially, the first thing I talk with about is, what are we doing here? What do you want to make this season? What do you want to make this drumline? Because it's not about hitting a clean roll. It's not about making sure that you're the best execution drumline. It's you are the UConn drumline, and you're putting everything out there on the field in terms of your soul, in terms of like all the rehearsal hours you put in, make it for something. And it's really cool to watch all of the different ranges of ability levels be able to relate to that concept. And then it is what it is for the pace at which each individual progresses. But you can tell when there's somebody with really great hands who doesn't want to be there versus somebody who doesn't have so great hands, but they are 200% in and they're having a blast and they're like laser focused. Yeah. I will take a hardworking person over somebody who is talented but doesn't work hard like any day, just because it's a better vibe for the group. So that performance unification through purpose is definitely a big aspect of how I teach visual.
And I'd have to imagine even that kind of 200% in type attitude is not only going to make that happen, but also make them more likely to improve at a faster pace, I would imagine, right? If they're focused and they're really about everything, I would imagine they could even overshadow someone that actually was more talented than them in the first place.
Sure.
And hopefully.
Yeah, but also the beautiful part is at the end of the day, if you're in a college band, and not even limited to college band, but if you're in a musical ensemble and it's non-competitive and the only reason that you're there is because you love it, it doesn't necessarily matter who you passed or who you're behind talent-wise, in my mind.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'll use 2011 as an example. I never thought that we would win a championship, nor was that the goal. My goal was to stay alive. The rehearsal days were brutal. I definitely was not one of the more talented people in the drum line, but we were all on the same page as far as like, this is why we're here. This is how hard we're going to work. And we're going to put the gas to the floor until the last performance. And then it just so happened that our last performance was the encore. And it was just that mindset that wasn't like I'm comparing myself to other people or we're comparing ourselves to other people. It was, we're here for each other. We're moving forward. That's it.
Yeah.
And that really added to the performance quality and really added to the show quality in general, I believe.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody literally yesterday about, the idea of how normally if a drumline is all really good friends with each other and they're on board with putting in the work, it usually ends up turning out fine.
The setup for that cadet season, I was told that I would have to drive up to UMass every weekend to drum with those guys, like Ian Whitaker, Tim Miller, Yad, all those guys who, what it would end up being is we would hang on Friday and then wake up Saturday, go get some Dunkin' Donuts, and then drum at Grinnell. And just do that for hours. And it wasn't like we were teching each other, or it wasn't like, it was just, let's just get the glue between this nucleus of people that much more solid. So we know that we can rely on each other when poop hits the fan. Right. It's like when you're at your weakest, that somebody else has your back. And I think that's really important with any kind of group, regardless of the activity we're talking about, or regardless of any kind of music versus non-music. If you're with a group of people and you need to perform, whether it's in corporate, whether it's in education, whether it's in, landscaping, like whatever, you need to know that the people who are in your group have your back. And I think that really assists with the elements of confidence on an individual level and then a group level.
Okay. Because even taking that into, especially the indoor realm where things are getting pretty wild now, it's like you're on this small floor, and especially at Dayton, you're just surrounded by all these people that are staring at you. And you have to do a lot of wild stuff, a lot of stuff that maybe might seem really funny to do normally, especially for people that are new to doing it. And I have to imagine it's like being able to execute all of that stuff at a high level, stuff that feels probably pretty intimate in terms of performance, having that hive mind that's all in it together makes it so much easier to maybe see it for the first time and also just jump into that for the first time.
Yeah, the clarity of where the gaps are is very important for group improvement. So to kind of make it more concrete, when you're marching, the best marcher makes the people on either side of them look right. Because if you're the only marcher that looks right, then you probably look wrong in terms of like the grand scheme of, I see 10 people, I see one person sticking out. Am I going to think that, oh, that one person is right?
Right.
So that synergy is really important.
Because especially with high school, we're like doing all the dance stuff at Newtown. It's like, I mean, if we were trying to do that with my high school when I was in high school, it would have never happened. There's no way. Like, I don't think even at Newtown it'd be possible if there wasn't a general culture built up with that over the years. So that new people that look like they would never dance in their entire lives can just go in there and just be like, sure, I'm going to do a sit roll now.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I'm just so interested in the performance aspect and that confidence element to it and how rehearsals are set up and how you brought up how the culture is set up. Because I have to imagine that makes potentially your work or whoever's work is working with the visual ensemble or designing or whatever a lot easier. Or less pulling of teeth, I should say.
Well, yeah, you think about the culture. I think about the culture as it could be generally categorized as like two things. Is it a task-driven culture or is it a mission-driven culture? And it would be like, okay, task-driven would be, okay, it is this competitive year. We need to get this score to get first place. Here's our show. There are 3 movements. We need to have X amount of body moments here, X amount of features here. And all right, we got to play that perfectly. Great. Execute that. There's no soul behind it. And then the identity of that organization is defined by that one season rather than the organization itself, right? So when you're talking about mission-driven, it is how is X organization going to represent itself this year? And I think that is something that takes time to build, and it takes consistent membership across, I say generational, so I mean like a senior who's been there for 4 years talks to an incoming freshman about here's what we do here. Leadership is really important in that. Setting the tone as instructors is really important in that. How we hold ourselves when I'll talk specifically about, drum lines. Do we come into a rehearsal space and line up our drums or do we not? Do we all tape our sticks the same way or do we not? Are we being inclusive of everybody, of each section, like pit, cymbals, and snares, bass, tenors? Like, are we all talking as a percussion group? Or is it, okay, it's the people on drums, and then it's cymbals, and then it's pit. That all matters. How do you move together? Because what it comes down to is the commitment level of each individual person is going to be dependent upon, in my opinion, the cohesiveness of the group. So if, I'll just say, if the cymbal line, for example, is not included in many of the things that, the snares, tenors, and basses are included in, how can you expect some kind of cohesion when it comes time to perform as a unit in the warm-up arc?
Yeah.
oh, you got to shift the arc around. Oh yeah, the cymbals have to come in because their part's coming up. Like I don't think that is me personally. I don't think that helps the group. I think if we move together. If we line up the drums, the cymbals need to line up their cymbals the same way at the same time. If we're writing an exercise packet, ask the cymbal tech what is the best for you to get your people warmed up so that we can pace a lot schedule so that we can line it all up so that by the time it's book time, they're already there and there's no like, hey, where are the cymbals? Or hey, where are the basses right now? Or where are the tenors? Everybody's on the same page, and that's day one. So having a well-crafted plan on how to get everybody on the same page and also decide on what kind of culture you want is going to translate into the performance quality.
Yeah.
On a psychological and emotional level.
I think it's just so, like, it's just super important to, like, set it up with this idea because, again, it's like, how can we really accomplish anything if we're not all on the same page? For all this super intricate stuff, even just general body moves with drums on is still not an easy thing to do, especially nowadays.
Right.
Including all the muscle, like the conditioning aspect, being able to actually maneuver your body how you want it to. So do you want to start off with the actual physical aspect in a specific area? Like, do you want to start off with just, fundamental movement or?
Yeah, sure. So when I was listening to Kat and Rex's podcast, there were so many things that they were sharing that resonated with me in terms of conditioning that are, I want to say, when I was coming up in the activity, they were overlooked in terms of how to be able to control your instrument and what you're going to do to allocate time and energy to get better at your instrument. And it was really cool to hear both of them talk about how cymbals need to use conditioning way more because holding plates in front of your body is a major ask for your shoulders and your back. Whereas a snare drummer, other than bass one, snare drummers have the easiest job, I think, carrying a small drum in front of you.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a cowbell or whatever, but you don't really have to worry about movement until it's time to move. But cymbals, because they need to, even if they're standing still, condition, it's already in their mindset. So my perception of that is, okay, if we're going to keep up with this trend in the activity where dance is included in everything and body awareness is included in everything, the conditioning part is like, okay, get a baseline first of what your body feels like when you're just standing there with no instruments. And we think about posture. What does your posture look like when you engage your core versus when you don't engage your core? What does your posture feel like when you lean forward, when you lean to the right or to the left, when you're rolling back your shoulders or when you're kind of hunching over, looking up versus looking straight versus looking kind of down? That all taps into different portions of the posture that we don't, at least when I was coming up, we didn't take time to become self-aware about as performers. It was really very much, this is what you should do, just do it. So like, one vivid thing I remember from 2008 at Stanford High was the head pop. There was a head pop where if we're facing backfield, you turn around and then when you halt, your head pops up. And that little thing was such a small lesson for me of, everybody's faces flash up because it reflects the light and it looks sharp. Mm-hmm. So even if somebody, fudged the halt, the fact that there's an articulation in the head, it brings everybody's eye to the head pop. So that was like a first introduction to how a visual element could increase the performance quality. So when you're talking about conditioning, it's very much how is your body structure presenting itself, and that goes into core training, endurance, and mindfulness, really. Like, how in tune are you with your body? Do you know where your arm is? And like so many times when I am in front of new players or even more experienced players, there are habits that they just aren't aware of. And it's not through any fault of their own. Like it's just something that didn't feel like a physical anomaly. And whoever was in front of them before or what they were doing before to see themselves, it wasn't just being addressed as like, hey, this is actually an issue that could be causing you not to be able to make your dot here. Or maybe like this restep is not supposed to be a restep. Maybe it's supposed to be a touch step and your weight shouldn't be moving side to side when you change direction. Mm-hmm. So things like that all go back to what is the baseline that a performer is coming in with, and then assessing where you need to get stronger.
Okay. And I like that point of just thinking about like, okay, like even just thinking about your general step position before you even start moving. Like, what does it actually feel like to have the shoulders forward rather than back or whatever? Because it is always just like, okay, just do this. But no one actually like tells you to explore that. People don't very often tell you to explore that. Even doing like the Hindu thing, I think even doing that as a student, I never like put two and two together because I was just like, yeah, I was folding and unfolding, but I wasn't actually being told to think so much about like what was actually happening. So I could imagine it's super helpful to have like a group of new students who've never done it before and just be like, okay, like, guys, what does this look like? If you look at your friend over here, does this look confident? Does this feel confident? What is it? Does it feel tense to have your shoulders crunched in like this? Stuff like that. And, you know, maybe those are questions they ask themselves, like at a random point in rehearsal, like when they're a junior or something.
Right. And that's kind of the thing I like about where the activity is moving. We're teaching body awareness and performance presence way earlier now, especially with dancers and color guard members now being integrated a lot more commonly into percussion staff and design. Yeah. Some of the best lessons I've learned about movement came from dancers or color guard, because a dancer comes in and they show, you know, these really boxy marching percussionists how to actually use your hips or how to actually turn in an angle where you would normally be restricted by harness. So it opens up this whole other realm of visual design. And it also helps performers learn more about their bodies and how they move and where they need to improve their balance. So I think including actual professional experts who know how to move without a drum on is really important and has been a major part in pushing this activity forward.
And I think you kind of mentioned this, but that whole aspect, maybe just to clarify, is enforcing what it's like to just be more agile with the drums on, just because it's enforcing awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So when you're how much time would you normally actually spend on marching basics? Like when we're thinking of maybe designing a body movement for an indoor show, you know, are we focusing more on that type of content? Or are we focusing more just on the fundamental stuff? And then once we get to the point where we need to design something, then it's like, okay, like we'll just figure that out. But we're relying more on our fundamentals to figure that out, if that makes sense.
I think there's definitely a way to do both simultaneously. And I'll use musical exercises as an example. So you have a writer and a designer of a show who already has their songs picked out and they know the tempo and you know the dynamic ranges. The vocabulary that's going to be played could be included in the exercise packets, so when it comes time to actually play the musical phrase in context of the book, it's an easy, hey, remember exercise 2? You're going to play exercise 2 3 times, and then you're going to move to exercise 5. Right. And then it's like a lick. So same with visual. You know, when you do, you know, from open first position with your toes pointed out in a V to open second, you're going to do that on beats 1 and then beat 3. And then that may have been like part of the visual exercise that we were drilling. over and over and over.
Right.
So having the vocabulary established through exercises can also help make the show learning process a lot more efficient. That thing that is required of the designer is that they keep both of those elements in mind. What is the level of the performers? And what is the vocabulary I want to use to design this show? And then put that vocabulary in context of the exercises.
Okay, because this is like filling in a lot of gaps for me. I mean, I only did very standard drum corps, like very, very structured marching. So I guess I've never really put it together in terms of visual like that, because I think most people's instinct is just be like, all right, we're doing asterisk drill, and then we're going to go do something else.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously asterisk drill is cool, and that helps, but I definitely see your point of even like taking for high school's basic exercises and then altering them in a way or a creative way that actually ends up helping the show and potential things that could happen. It sounds like from what you're saying, at least.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think it comes to a point where you can just reference that thing they already did over and over and over and over during preseason and say, in this body moment, you know, Bobby, you're going to do a plie. Do you remember what a plie is? Okay, great. You're going to do a plie on beat 3. All right. Jan, you're going to do, you're going to do exercise 2 where we looked left and then right. You're going to do that on beat 5. And it is a really easy way to take that vocabulary and input it in the show design. And that helped a lot with teaching DCA and college band, because you don't have 90 days to perfect something. You have weekends and then rehearsals during the week sometimes. And how are you going to give that information to all the members immediately, as quickly as possible, while still producing a quality performance? So all of the winter camps, all of the auditions, you're already setting the tone of this is what you need to learn, and this is why. So again, it goes back to that idea of purpose. Why are we learning triplet rolls at 180 beats per minute at 3 inches, or pianissimo, or piano, however your height dynamic is in that drum line? Why are we doing that? Oh, because you're going to play a 2-bar triplet roll in the closer. The thing is, when we were growing up, or at least when I was growing up being taught, I didn't even have an opportunity to ask why. It was kind of just like, do it. Yeah. Do it because I'm telling you to do it. Now, as the activity is evolving and students are becoming more savvy with YouTube and, learn the lick, the Vic Firth licks or whatever, there is now more of an analytical thinking of, why are we doing this? Why is that? And it's easy as a designer to be like, we're doing these exercises because half of this stuff is going to go in your drum feature. Now everybody's hyped about the exercises.
Yeah.
And everybody's hyped up about, like, I need to be able to do circle drill at 196 beats per minute and change directions on a dime because there's a sick moment coming up in the drum feature, and I need to be able to do this. So putting the exercises in context of the show not only adds efficiency to like learning the show, but it also, again, reinforces that sense of purpose of why the hard things that we have to drill in are important.
It makes me think of how long I've spent in like a rehearsal. There'll be like 2 rehearsals in a week, and then there's a show on Saturday or something for high school, and how much time is spent on like learning how to spot a turn and like the nuance of that. Yeah. So it totally makes sense. Just doing that right away, probably something that'll happen in a show, possibly. But when you're setting up exercises like that, and this is definitely a very fluid thing, but would you prefer to listen to a lot of stuff ahead of time? I know like sometimes drill is done very on the spot, a lot of body's done like very on the spot. But do you prefer to kind of listen maybe to an MP3 of something that's going to happen, and then maybe in your own head perceive something that might be cool in that moment, maybe within the context of how the hands are actually moving, the audience engagement, maybe during the energy level of that part? Or are you like mostly trying to interject a lot of basic, still fundamental body skills that will probably be used in the exercises?
I think there is a mixture of it. So it's almost like the question you're asking is, before you sit down and write a book, are you memorizing every word you're going to use in the book, or are you going to just focus on the story? And I think it is a mixture. So as an instructor, you want to know what kind of level your group is at collectively and what kind of level each individual member is at. So that kind of gives you a sense of what they need to improve on and what they need to get reps on for the exercise packet. For me, then I have like a bank of like, okay, I know they can do this really well, and I know they can't do this really well. So it kind of informs how often I use something in a visual design. But when I look at how it aligns with the music, I listen to the MP3 a bunch. I try to think about, that's a really great impact point. And I generally think about the idea of a visual moment in shades, not a defined, like, this is how people will do it. Like, I can't do it like that. I need to see it and then trial and error. So the shades come in the form of me marking in the music, like in the bar line. I'll notice that there's like a unison hit across everything. And then I'll notice there are cymbal chokes here, here, and here. Or I'll notice that there's a longer phrase here, and maybe that is a slow, fluid motion into a really sharp staccato, sharp articulation visual. So I'll physically write in my music, alternating ripple here, or from this beat to this beat, and I'll do a tie, toe point slide into the planted foot, and I'll have like my own little codes for what the thing is, and then when I actually teach it, I will be referencing that, but then demonstrating to the students and then seeing how it actually works out. So I'm throwing paint at the canvas. I know the colors, but I don't exactly know where they're going to go just yet. I need to see what it looks like, how it feels, and how it sounds in person, because at the end of the day, that awareness needs to stay on. If something doesn't look right, it doesn't matter how many hours you spent designing it. Your ego has to be out of it. If it doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, you have to change it. So it's definitely a multi-pronged approach of establishing expected vocabulary by assessing the ability level of the group and the individuals, and then looking at the music, listening to the music, taking notes, and then the final step is trying it out and doing it with the students. And depending on how comfortable you are with your students, you can say, like, what do you guys think? Is that fun? Do you like doing that? Does that look awesome? Like, here's the video. I'll show them a video of, like, that's another thing, reflecting on video recordings, like taking a video of it and then looking at it and seeing, okay, where does my eye go? Because then you're putting your theory actual into application. So, I thought this would be a cool ripple effect. It actually doesn't do anything for me because they're in the back right corner. We should take that out and move it here. So a lot of reflection and planning and organic development.
Okay, yeah, because I'm like trying to ask the question. I feel like it's always on the tip of my tongue, but that like explains all of it. I feel like I could ask the right question now. But no, so it sounds like the like for just general it's like preparation meets opportunity, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly that.
And it makes me wonder, like, okay, like if I'm a visual designer working for a show this upcoming season, say there's a season that can be done in someone's high school, but if the whole show is written, I would imagine, even while thinking of the exercises initially, I would be listening through the entire show, and maybe even thinking of those moments, for like highlighting the shades of those moments possibly first, and then applying potentially that to exercises and maybe just simplifying them more. So that everything's kind of like a tiered process.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, in most, I even want to say in all of the drum lines I've been in, there was always way more exercises in the exercise packet than we end up playing at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a natural progression because, you don't need to be doing, I don't know.
Like an etude.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to be doing like a whole spree. And then really it's supposed to be just for like grace note placement. It ends up just being like isolating the grace note and then isolating the primary stroke and then playing it at the same time and then using the actual phrase in the music as the exercise later on.
Yeah.
So part of the exercise packet that is sent out is a weeding process and a tree shaker. So that is expectation setting. And then as you move deeper into the season and the show becomes to develop more and more, it kind of funnels down into like, okay, here are the basic elements we need to have down for this show this season.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I'm like trying to like my best to like figure out like everything that's supposed to happen. Because I'm like obviously been a visual member of an ensemble, but I never like get so detailed with how everything runs. We always like let other people do that job.
Yeah.
But
totally.
I also feel like same thing with the cymbals. Like I like feel like very disconnected, and I can only make so many comments about like even how a show is designed because I don't quite understand the whole aspect to it. But that's really cool. I've never really thought about it that way, but it makes so much sense, and it seemed like such a straight ahead process. It makes things so much easier and more efficient.
Yeah, I think teaching at a bunch of different places and being involved with a bunch of different staff cultures really helped me understand the basic elements of what visual looks like regardless of the level. You know, like a clean sticks in or a clean sticks down looks good no matter what uniform you're wearing.
Yeah.
If it's together, it looks great. So having a better understanding of the commonalities between how the human body kind of moves helps guide my philosophy on how I teach visual, regardless if it's competitive or non-competitive, regardless if it's a novice group or a very experienced group. It's all the same to me in my mind.
And with like topics like body control, like you suggested, do you have to think a lot about literal muscle groups and how muscle groups move, or how like literal appendages move, and like to actually start creating the body the best way that you can, especially with the restrictions of the harness and drum?
I think part of it is experience. Like you need to know, for me as a snare drummer, I know what hurts on my body when I try to do certain things. I know with a certain carrier, whether it's, you know, a Mapex carrier that digs into your hip, or if it's a Yamaha carrier or a Dynasty carrier. Like the new Dynasty carriers are like roller coaster strap-in things. Like they're so padded. When I first started, the Dynasty carriers were like very uncomfortable. We had to buy so a lot of that goes into experience in order to be able to relate to the performer. Because if you're asking a performer to do, I'll just use the seated roll or the hip roll that you're talking about, asking them to do that with a harness on literally does not make sense. Yeah. So when you have somebody coming in who's never done the activity at a level with that specific instrument, trying to tell you to do something, it doesn't make any sense. Just like I will never teach a cymbal player how to do anything with something. Like I have no idea. So it's really important to get people in front of the students who know not only the knowledge, but also have the experience so that they can relate to what the performer is experiencing. And that's not to say anybody who hasn't marched drum corps is not allowed to teach. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you don't know how heavy cymbals are, pick them up. If you don't know how heavy a bass 5 is, wear it. You know, if you don't know quad, like when I was teaching CWP in the deconstructed year, we had to figure out how the quads felt when there was two drums on one side and then one drum just kind of on its own on the other side. Like, how does that affect movement? And how does that affect your ability to turn to your left shoulder or to your right shoulder? So shout out to Andrew Urbano. And like, he had to deal with that a lot and trying to figure out what does it feel like. So what it took was we as instructors had to put on the equipment and feel what the visual demand would actually feel like. So there is a level of, I want to say, humility and a level of empathy designers and instructors need to have if they're going to be able to truly put in a moment that makes sense for the performer and is effective visually.
Yeah. I think that brings up a couple things. It's like if I'm, a director trying to find people for my group, whether it's outdoor or indoor, there is advantages to having, yes, one person that's good with dance, maybe it's a color guard person, and also, yes, one person that knows visual very well with the drum. But even then, like, I guess, for example, say they could only hire one person, they got the color guard person.
Right.
Maybe that person could literally take home one of the drums.
Right,
somehow.
Exactly.
And like figure that out, or even just grab a harness, like an old harness, and like start understanding what that feels like too, just with the upper body. And I don't know if a lot of people necessarily even think about that. I've never seen many people put on a drum. I think I've seen you put on a set of quads before, for sure.
I do that because if I'm designing body, I always have the mindset of a snare drummer. So I'm like, oh yeah, you could turn on a dime like this, and then one of the quad members will be like, yeah, I don't think I could do that. Before I say, don't give me that, yes, you can, I'm like, okay, hang on, give me your equipment.
Yeah.
After, troubleshooting internally, and I'm like, okay, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. Then I scrap the idea and I try something else. But unfortunately, I've seen some instructors be like, just do it. Just do it because I'm telling you to. And it's not necessarily an efficient way of doing it because they could get injured, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, maybe it isn't worth the effort. Maybe it's not that effective.
Right.
And maybe you could do something way simpler that is more effective. And that is something that I've seen a lot of great groups do. Simple is very effective. And I've taken that concept with me to college band. You could do a triplet 16th note grid with grace notes everywhere, but the audience is going to be like, okay, cool, you just played a bunch of sounds. Versus if you do like a stick flip in the middle of quarter notes, that's like, whoa, that's awesome, great, that's simple. And it's easy to do, so let's just do that.
All of that makes me think of like muscle conditioning, like especially for quad players, trying to kneel on the ground and get back up is a whole different story than a snare drummer. So, I mean, even in high school, it's like a lot of kids just don't have that in them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's totally hard. I think that's where the conditioning comes in. I think there is an important aspect of core strength that needs to be addressed no matter what, because your core is literally the thing that connects your shoulders to your hips.
Yeah.
And if you don't engage your core at every moment that you're moving, it's going to look sluggish and it's going to look slow. And you times that by however many members are on the floor or on the field, that's a very dirty looking set.
Yeah.
So core control is in every aspect of your body function when it comes to movement.
Okay.
I've noticed that a lot, especially with the pandemic. I'm getting back into martial arts. It's all about core. And now that I'm focusing on that, I think back to all the comments that were made to me when I was marching. Engage your core, lift out of your hips so you can move smoothly and glide when you're marching.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, and how often do we think about using our core when we're walking? How often do we think to use our core when we're just standing there? And if you make that second nature, then that's one less thing you have to think about as a performer. So that would be something that I would suggest to any group that I teach. When you're going upstairs, how often do you bounce? When you're running, if you run at all, can you run? Why can't you run? Why does it hurt? Why does it feel like, you're off balance? Are you engaging your core? Are you absorbing impacts and helping your joints be protected by having a strong core that absorbs that shock every time?
Right. That's wild. It's such an easy thing to ask students to do too. But I don't think a lot of people don't even think about it. I certainly don't think about it that way. So you could just literally literally if you walk up a set of stairs, like, do you bounce? Yes or no? And that's like already like breaking part of the wall
yeah.
to figuring it out.
I think one of the themes that I see is if you're in band or if you're in drumline, you're not a physically active person. I think that is complete false.
Yeah.
It's completely false. Like, this is a physical athletic sport, but kids go into it not thinking it's the same as like football, or not thinking it's the same as a sport. So then it's the first time they've heard, you got to use your core. You have to understand where your center of gravity is. And to many of these students, it's the first time they've been asked to do something with their body that involves athleticism. So the sooner we can incorporate that and make it commonplace to talk about core control and talk about body posture and talk about conditioning and the athleticism involved to make a great performance, then the sooner we can get higher level players in competitive atmospheres, if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. 'Cause, I mean, I definitely underestimate that. I mean, I still grew up doing Taekwondo, so I still had some semblance of that.
Nice.
And I don't think about that. So, I mean, even after doing several years of drum corps, I totally had forgotten what it's, or maybe I never truly knew what it was like to really not pay attention to that stuff because I was still playing sports as a kid.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I didn't know you did Taekwondo, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, I did Taekwondo up until I moved to moved to Connecticut, rather.
Oh, nice.
I forget what belt I got to. I think they're in my closet.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I have the first board I ever broke in my closet somewhere.
Wow.
That's like the date on it and everything. It's about like 2003 or 2002 or something.
Wow, that's pretty sweet.
But yeah, so even for myself, I've definitely 100% underestimated that.
I think your body awareness and your ability to control your body goes hand in hand with how confident you feel.
Yeah.
It's also that confidence piece is going to translate because this is an art. It's an art form. Whether it's a musical representation or a visual representation, how you're feeling in the moment is going to translate to the audience.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest questions I get from students is, how are we supposed to feel? And it's like, to me, it's like, well, how do you feel?
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you feel? Do you feel dumb? Do you feel dumb doing this? Because it looks like you feel dumb. But if I'm supposed to tell you you're supposed to feel excited, and you don't really feel excited, it's not define the emotion. It's address how you're feeling. You're supposed to be aggressive in this moment. Okay, fake aggression. Okay, it looks inauthentic. What's going on? Well, I'm actually having trouble with this part in the music. Oh, okay, cool. So you don't have confidence in this part in the music. There's no way you can have now extra bandwidth to resonate confidence. So now let's address the actual technical issue, so you can then put more mental bandwidth in the performance aspect.
Yeah.
A lot of that is, how comfortable and capable are you with the show design and the demand? And then from there, how much bandwidth do you have left over to put into the actual performance quality?
Yeah.
So that the second nature stuff is the show and what the task is. Now you add your own performance quality and you put in your personality into the performance, which is where it gets really fun.
And I guess if you start eliminating those questions with kids, I mean, the easier it is for them to find that within themselves or their own perception of it. I think one of the coolest things I learned from Dan, working with Dan at Hurricanes, is that he does the whole kind of like Excel spreadsheet type thing, like Google Sheets thing, where each part of the show, even as it's written, is filled out with every aspect of what's going on, including like multiple versions of like the emotional content or whatever, however you want to split that up.
Sure.
But that not only like helps designers, but that's also a document that can be available to instructors if they ever get like one of those questions from the kids. But also it could, I guess, potentially be available to maybe section leaders or students, so that everyone's just always aware of what's supposed to actually be happening, and there's never a question about it. So if they're trying to interject their own idea about it, it's not like, okay, I'm being told in March that I have to have this emotion here, so now I'm going to like think about the emotion, process what the show is, also process how I'm going to feel about that, also try to think about my awareness of how I look all at the same time.
Yeah.
And then turn it into like, okay, like Am I like,
Right.
I heard about this in December, like, am I actually doing this still? Like, okay.
Yeah, there's definitely academic information versus inherent information that
Yeah.
you need to sift through as a performer, because you're not thinking about bar line 158 and this must be at 3 inches after a 12-inch attack. You're not thinking that. You're thinking, oh, this is my favorite part. Or like, oh, this part's sweet. Oh, here I have to relax a little bit. All right, relax, let it go, and then
Yeah.
a lot of energy. It's more macro emotions and macro, I want to say thought triggers, where that's how you memorize your show. At least that's how I memorize my show.
Mhm.
But all the work of all the detailing and the reps, that's all done way in advance, so that once you're in performance mode, or once all your rehearsals start becoming more and more performance mode,
Mhm.
it is second nature to just have all those details ironed out, and then you just remind yourself, okay, here's where, I think this and I do this and I feel this.
Yeah.
And it's less about 3 inches, 6 9 3 6 12 3 3 3 3. It's like there's no way you're going to think about all that in real time.
Yeah. It just seems like kind of the rule for success is to just start building everyone's vocabulary early on, whether that's the music or the visual or the show, and like their understanding. Like if it's a show, like being able to read the book first, and then as you're almost like rewriting the book yourself, just becoming a master of that book, as opposed to being like a teacher throwing a book at them and they're trying to like figure out the spark notes.
Yeah.
Trying to like write their interpretation of it for their like 5-point essay that's due in class or something.
Exactly. I think one of what you just described brings me to a quote. I forget who said it, so sorry, but the quote was, "It is the performer's job to fill in the space on the page that the composer did not write."
Yeah.
And all of that has to do with how you understand and find purpose in the music, and how you portray that music, and how you express that music as best you can based on the notes that the composer intended. So that leaves a lot of really cool opportunity for a performer to own it, and make it their own rendition of that triplet roll or that body movement. Because when you see it as a group, you're like, okay, that was, awesome, that was Blue Knights, or, that was Newtown High School, or that was Cadets, or that was Cavaliers, like whatever. But when you look at the performer on an individual level, you're like, they're into it. Like, look at that. They believe in what they're doing, and I am with them in this moment. And I think that's the job of the performer, to engage the audience in a way where they are so proficient in what they're doing that the audience has no choice but to just be in awe of the performance. Yeah. And when a performer has a whole list of things that, aren't executed well, and they show that they're recognizing that they're not executing it well, it's a distraction for the audience. Or they drop their stick, and the performer, their face now looks like upset the rest of the performance, because their stick is like hanging on the ground. Yeah. I've seen top groups break, or top groups drop a stick, but the ones who recover from that moment and play it off really well are the ones who are just excellent at performing regardless of whatever error happened, because nobody's perfect, right? But that's what you strive to be. But beyond that, it's the level of performance that kind of overshadows the small blemishes or imperfections that could be happening.
Yeah. It's interesting how much of that is just supported by the preparation aspect. I mean, it's such an easy concept to say, like, okay, like, well, make sure we focus on these exercises, whether it's the music or the visual exercises, or making sure people are aware of their show, or have even heard their show in its entirety before. But also thinking of all that stuff within the context of the grander scale. Like, are these exercises, again, like you're saying, reflecting show music in both aspects of the visual and the music, and just how much time that saves, how much time that just, as instructors, allows students to do what they need to do. And maybe that is what gives them more confidence, because they don't have to like they're not as confused about what's going on. They know exactly what's happening, hopefully, if they're paying attention through the whole process. But I've never thought about that, how streamlined that actually is.
And this is just my philosophy. This is definitely not the answer. I think this is just what makes it make sense in my mind. Building a culture at UNH, building a culture at Fusion, at CWP, all of it had to have a very intentional planning phase where how are we designing the packet? How are we designing the audition packet?
Yeah. What
is the show? How are we sharing information with the members so that they understand the concept? Like the Dream Electric, that CWP show, we were sharing a bunch of different pictures and videos of cyborgs, looking at the sky and thinking about concepts like the Matrix and thinking about concepts like what is reality, going into philosophical discussions about this, and then how to take those ideas and represent it on the floor so it's accessible and relatable. That is something that takes a lot of time. And in my mind, unless you're superhuman, you can't be doing that during the heat of the season. You can't be thinking about where the rehearsal site is, how many hours do we get in the gym? Do we have to move all these logistics? And then also be like, hey, so what are we trying to do for movement 2?
Yeah.
And it's like a February show's coming up, so.
Yeah, I can't even tell you how many times in drum corps that we've had to be like gathered together, like during a tour, and they like slowly, movement by movement, reveal what it's actually supposed to mean.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, it totally was the vibe that they didn't know what it means, and they figured it out.
Got it.
The day before. But it's like, how destructive that is. It's wild.
I think there's definitely a middle ground between like not knowing what the final product is actually going to be versus still trying to plan out the intent of the show.
Yeah.
Like if you're getting ready to paint something like a sky and all you got are brown colors, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It's like we've been painting this whole time, but it's like a blank image because we don't have any of the colors we need.
Right, yeah. So there's definitely some planning. And again, it goes back to self-awareness. Like the designers and the instructors also need to be self-aware. What are they not good at? What gaps need to be filled? I do not know cymbals. I need to have a person who's done cymbals and been a cymbal performer, a cymbal member with experience so that we can have a baller cymbal line. There's no way I'm going to be like, I march snare drum. Let's just get whoever got cut and put them on cymbals and then I'll just teach them how to bang them together. Like that is not how I would want my snare line to be run. So why would I have that be for any other section?
Yeah.
And I think that is where the self-reflection kind of comes in of, do I really know what my shortcomings are as an instructor and a designer, and can I recognize that so that I can get people on board who can fill that gap? Because it's all for the benefit of the student and the performance. So that self-awareness piece kind of goes into a lot of aspects of this activity and other activities in general.
Okay. So yeah, I think that really encapsulates a lot. I mean, it almost makes me wonder if we should just do like a part 2. We could go back in and do something about the true like implementation physically more so.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know we're supposed to cover that today, but we got into like culture building and stuff, but I always appreciate that. Our conversations are always usually very, I feel like for as long as I've known you, we always kind of get really analytical, which I enjoy about the conversation. So I would totally to talk about the technical aspects of movement and marching and kind of the pedagogy behind that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I just had never thought about how much everything is like so related inside of each aspect of a show or of a marching ensemble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I learned that across all the different levels of this specific activity that I taught. Yeah. It's not enough to be like, we got to be the best. That is not a driving force of like, if you're comparing your purpose based on other groups' execution level, then you will only be as good as how people view you.
Yeah.
And I think that it puts an immediate ceiling on it. So that self-reflection piece and understanding what do you want your culture to be in the organization, regardless if it's competitive or not, is going to have a lot to do with how that performance quality is going to translate to the audience.
Yeah.
There was one thing that Rex was talking about, how SCV comes up in a lot and the cymbals will plow through you going to, right? So there's no musical aspect to that. That is strictly a visual presence that people just know to get the F out of the way. Same idea. Same exact idea. Before anybody picks up a drumstick or before anybody hits a first note, the audience in the lot is looking at how the drumline is holding themselves.
Right.
And that's going to form the frame of your opinion. So, business interviews, same thing. Do you come in tattered clothes, or do you come in, dressed in formal wear? Do you stand up straight or not? Do you smile or not? Do you look like you're closed off, or do you look open and confident? Like, it's all subliminal things that go into the visual aspect of a performance.